The Last of Us Season 2 recently aired its season finale. If you're mainly a show watcher, you know that The Last of Us is based off the video game series of the same name, with Season 1 covering the first game and Season 2 and 3, and even reportedly a fourth season covering Part 2. But recently, there has been more fans upset at the season than the last one with its mixed reception and tone. So why are we so upset about this season of The Last of Us? And what other points of frustration do people have on this modern era of streaming in general? We'll go deep into it and cover all that and more in today's video. So to start off this video, let me just give you guys my thoughts on Season 2 as a whole. It's been feeling a lot like it's missing parts of the story, which, yeah, there are some pacing issues because, of course, this season is covering half of a nearly 30-hour game. Also, apologies for not being able to use any footage from the show. Warner Brothers will claim the entire video if we use any of their footage, so we're going to keep it to gameplay here. For show watchers only, the game has two big portions. One is Ellie's part and the other is Abby's. So it seems like they were translating this into each character getting a season. So of course this required some padding when you added into a full season of a TV show. They also cut down the episode count from 9 from the first season to 7 in Season 2. And they also expanded some stuff in Jackson, and even introduced us to some new characters the game never really covered, like Gail and her husband Eugene, as a catalyst for Ellie being mad at Joel for lying and betraying his word, on top of her suspicions from Salt Lake City. Overall, this season felt a little bit more weaker when compared to the previous season, because of the issue that the story isn't fully being told like how the first season just covered the first game. It was a complete story that you could have just left off. But for Season 2, it's more or less leaving off a cliffhanger with no answers for show watchers, only for maybe another 2 years. And that's why a lot of people are somewhat frustrated with the way that they're handling it, which leads me into the main portions of this video. The real reason why a lot of people are frustrated with this modern era of TV is purely just because of the wait between seasons. One of the key issues facing modern television, especially in this nightmare streaming era, is the growing gap between seasons of major shows. Viewers like you and me often find themselves waiting several years for the next installment of a series, and while this isn't exactly a new phenomenon, it becomes a more noticeable pattern with some of the biggest shows on streaming platforms. Let's revisit The Last of Us as an example. Season 1 released in 2023, and it drew critical acclaim and had pretty high viewership. But after a lengthy wait, Season 2 had fully been released 2 years later, with 2 less episodes and a cliffhanger on top of it. And even now, fans are already aware that Season 3 isn't really expected until 2027, which is another 2 years on top. I hate to really regurgitate this meme, but we're really gonna get GTA 6 before Season 3 of The Last of Us. That's a significant 6 years to release 3 seasons of TV, which naturally raises the question about how this model affects audience engagement and long-term success with these shows. This pattern of long waits between seasons isn't really unique to The Last of Us. Looking back at the history of prestige television, there was a time when major shows managed to maintain a much faster turnaround time between seasons. Shows like The Sopranos, The Wire, and Lost typically aired new seasons on an annual schedule with only occasional delays. The consistency of these releases helped keep fan bases engaged, and each season will build on the last. And there was less risk of losing the audience attention or enthusiasm. That's why people look back on those shows and how they stayed in the public consciousness for so long. Even when a show took a brief hiatus, it wasn't unusual for viewers to stay invested because, well, the wait was relatively short by comparison. The modern landscape looks pretty different nowadays. As television productions have grown more ambitious, particularly with high budget and cinematic shows, the time required to create each season has expanded. For example, Game of Thrones became known not just for its storytelling, but also for pretty long production gaps between later seasons. And I want to stress later seasons. The first seasons up until maybe Season 6 was released on an annual schedule. But when Season 7 aired in 2017, with the final season following in 2019 after nearly 2 years. House of the Dragon had also followed a similar trajectory, with extended breaks between seasons. These gaps are often attributed to the sheer scale of the productions. The visual effects and the complex set designs and large ensembles, all of it requires significant time to execute. And while that's understandable from a production standpoint, it does create challenges in maintaining any momentum and sustaining audience engagement. For fans, these long waits can be really frustrating, and the excitement that builds around successful seasons tend to fade over time. And by the time a new season is finally released, some viewers may have just moved on. It's also a question of memory. After years away, it can be hard to recall all the details of a complex narrative. Streaming platforms and creators often try to address this with recaps and marketing pushes ahead of a new season, television, but there's no guarantee the audience will return in the same numbers or with the same level of enthusiasm as before. People just cannot care about a storyline they were invested in 3 years ago. A bunch of shows and movies and general life stuff happens in between all of that. We're only human. The Last of Us offers a useful case study in this trend. It's clear that the show has a dedicated fan base, but the question is whether that momentum can be sustained over the course of 4 years before season 3. And this isn't unique to The Last of Us. Many shows in the current landscape face similar challenges. The success of a new season often depends not only on the quality of the episodes, but also on how much of the audience remains engaged after the long wait. At the same time, it's pretty important to consider the reasons behind these delays. Large-scale productions have become more complex and demanding than ever before. Creating high-quality television that rivals blockbuster films takes time, and to be honest, sometimes fans don't even want that much. From elaborate sets and location shoots to cutting-edge visual effects and post-production work, these elements all really contribute to longer timelines. There's also the matter of scheduling. Actors, directors, and writers often work on multiple projects, which can further complicate the process. In some cases, the long gaps don't seem to hurt the show's popularity. For instance, Stranger Things has managed to maintain a strong following despite lengthy waits between seasons. It's been 3 years since the end of season 4, and we still don't have a release date for season 5 yet at the time of this recording. Euphoria is another example of a show that, while delayed, still draws attention when it returns, but not every show has that level of cultural staying power, and the longer the wait, the greater the risk of losing part of that audience. There's also a broader context of streaming era. There's simply more competition for viewers' attention now than ever before. New shows are released consistently, and it's easy for a series to get lost in the shuffle, especially if it's been off the air for several years. Not every show is doing this whole 2-year skip gap. Shows like The Bear and Only Murders in the Building, and new shows like The Pit, by the way, love The Pit, give it a shot if you like ER, have shown that they're planning on keeping consistent schedules of yearly releases. So this trend has affected pretty much everything. Then again, some of these shows have limitations that they aren't technically prestige TV, that streamers aren't putting an entire war chest of money behind. These shows usually have limited budgets and can easily recycle sets. It's how sitcoms are so cheap to produce and can get away with having 20-episode seasons. So while fans may be frustrated with the long waits, and while there's always a risk of diminished returns, it's also true that these delays are often necessary for the type of content that audiences have come to expect. High production values and ambitious storytelling don't happen overnight, and ultimately it becomes a trade-off. Audiences get high-quality cinematic television, but they have to wait longer between seasons. Whether that's a fair trade depends on the perspective of each viewer. For The Last of Us, the next test will come in 2027 with the release of season 3. It will be interesting to see how much of the audience sticks around, and whether the show can maintain its relevance after such a long gap, especially when the show has gone through a major storyline change like the death of Joel, and having the entire show rest on Bella Ramsey, who's doing a great job, don't get me wrong, but arguably losing one of the show's main draws in Pedro Pascal has some of the audience admittedly dropped off. And yes, there's nothing they could have done there because Joel died in the game, but when you offset Ellie's revenge story to being resolved in a hypothetical season 4 whenever that releases, you can understand why some people will just drop off. Season 2 has seen a drop off of viewership compared to last season. Now whether or not this is mainly due to a drop off in streaming numbers in general, or how accurate those numbers are considering streamers will never release those numbers to the general public, that remains to be seen. It's a situation that reflects on a broader trend across the industry, one where the ambitions of the creators and the realities of the production timelines can often clash with the expectations of the audience, and it's an issue that doesn't really seem to be going away anytime soon. But those are just my thoughts on this. Thank you guys for watching, and remember that we're always doing #mailbag, so please put down your comments below if you want to answer it in another video. See you guys next time.